suppose drawing is really the essence of what we do. It translates our thoughts. It's also the vehicle for communicating our ideas with the world. Drawings really have gone back to the start of time, I suppose, as a fundamental way of communicating. I like the use of the yellow tracing paper roll. It's got a freedom to it, and the blank page that allows you to really just Imagineer with no constraints, frankly, and it allows you to explore options ad infinitum. The use of the pen and coloured pencils and felt pens is really a freedom, I think, that's unique to the architectural profession. And gradually the drawings become reality. You leave the realm of optioneering and get into more specific tactical thinking about the issues of how you plan a building, how you lay out a building, how you relate a building to other buildings. So drawing is really the vehicle for that. You can start to imagine the textures of the building by really colour craning in. It's as simple as that. The shadow diagrams and the skyography all add to the depth and the three-dimensionality of the piece. And gradually you become more convinced or otherwise by the options. The yellow paper roll's expendable, so until you find something that you're comfortable with as a solution to the various constraints, the pen and pencil just needs to keep flowing.
I think we're coming out of the recession now, and practices are beginning to grow again. The market is recovering and practices are willing to experiment, they're willing to change, they're starting to expand, and they're looking at where they're going to go next.
One of the biggest challenges has been to stop the majority of architects overdoing things and showing off. Architects will think that their buildings are important. They will think that they're visually important, and some are, but the majority of buildings are there to contain functions and to sit within a setting.
The JRA concept of contextual modernism is, I think, quite a useful one, because on the one hand it says the architecture we do is what one would describe as contemporary as opposed to classical or some other historic style. But on the other hand, it's not saying our building will have primacy over anything that surrounds it.
Contextual modernism is the ethos of John Robertson Architects. It's a philosophy that I think we've really gradually developed over our 20-year period. I've always been very interested in how buildings work within the city and how buildings work within cities, and I think there's a great opportunity for buildings to work in harmony with one another, but I also think there's a great opportunity for individual buildings to stand out from the crowd. John Robertson Architects completed One Great St Helens for Greycoat in 1997, and this was one of the most important pieces of work we did in the origins of the practice, which explored our ethos and idea of contextual civic modernism. And our architecture had to respond to many different contextual positions. On the north side of the building you have the Great St Helens Church. On the south side of the building you have huge 43-storey towers. The city is an area of London that is really full of these diametrically opposed references. You've got very historic buildings, you've got very modern buildings, and we wanted to design a building that really was a medium between the historic enclave of St Helens and very modern buildings.
The question of how you deal with new and old in a way which is neither offensive on the one hand nor boring on the other, is well illustrated by the work that JRA did on the Daily Express building. Now here they were faced with a historic context because the Daily Express building, a listed and fine example of the heyday of newspapers from the 1930s. But on the other hand, there was the potential for a huge amount of additional commercial space once the newspaper had moved out.
Our solution was really to understand and look at the very different townscape of each of the streets and to model the building to sit within that variegated townscape. And we used stone on the Fleet Street frontage, whereas we used metal and glass on Shoe Lane and on St Bride Street.
JRA's work is a good example of a number of recent trends that have led to a changing face of what we think of as commercial architecture and office architecture in particular.
We're sitting in the atrium of Park House in Finsbury Circus, which is a very large project that we completed for Prudential Assurance about 5 years ago. Very interesting project comprising 2 listed buildings which overlook Finsbury Circus. These 2 buildings, 16 and 18,